I still remember the way the man at the petrol station stopped smiling the moment I told him where I was going. His hand froze halfway to lighting his cigarette. The match burned down too close to his fingers, but he didn't even notice. "You're going to that cabin?" he asked quietly. I nodded. I told him I needed a few days alone. No noise, no people, just trees and silence. That's when he shook his head like I had said something stupid or dangerous. "No one stays there for long," he said. "And those who do, they stop sleeping properly." I laughed a little, tried to make it light, but he didn't laugh back. Instead, he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "If you wake up and see footprints outside in the morning, don't follow them." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. I didn't ask him what kind of footprints. I didn't want to sound nervous. I just paid for the fuel and left. But as I drove deeper into the forest road, his words kept repeating in my head like they were stuck there. "Don't follow them." The road narrowed after the town disappeared behind the trees. Mobile signal died somewhere near the second bend. After that, it was just me, the engine sound, and a forest that seemed too still. Not peaceful still, more like watching still. The cabin showed up suddenly, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. Old wooden structure, dark roof, small windows that reflected nothing, even though the sun was still up. No birds around it. That was the first strange thing I noticed. Usually forests are loud in their own way. Wind, insects, birds. But here, it felt like everything gave the cabin space. Like even nature didn't want to get too close. I parked the car and stepped out. The air was colder here. Not just temperature, something else, something heavier. I told myself I was just tired. The key was under a loose stone near the steps, just like the owner had said in the message. Simple arrangement, almost too simple. But when I picked it up, I noticed something I didn't expect. The stone wasn't just loose. It looked placed carefully, like someone checks it often. That thought should have made me leave. I still don't know why it didn't. Inside, the cabin smelled like old wood and dust that had been sitting for years. Everything was covered in a thin layer of stillness. Even the light felt slow through the windows. I dropped my bag, walked around. One room, small kitchen, bedroom, a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. Normal, almost comforting. Almost. But then I saw the marks. Near the back door. At first I thought it was just dirt, but when I got closer, I realized they were lines scratched into the wood, not random. Straight, repeated. Like someone had dragged their fingers down the doorframe again and again. I touched them without thinking. The wood was smooth inside the grooves, old, very old. Like the scratches weren't recent, but the cabin itself didn't feel that abandoned. That contradiction made my stomach tighten. I told myself I was imagining things, that isolation does that, makes your mind fill gaps. So I unpacked, tried to settle in. By sunset, the forest outside had changed completely. Shadows stretched longer than they should. The silence got deeper, like it was thickening. That's when I noticed something taped inside the kitchen cabinet door. A small piece of paper, yellowed, folded unevenly. I almost didn't read it, but I did. It was handwritten. Do not leave food outside at night. Do not open the door before sunrise. If you see footprints, they are already gone. No signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. My first thought was prank, old owner joke, some local superstition. My second thought I didn't like. Why would someone specifically warn about footprints? That night, I checked every lock twice before going to bed. The cabin creaked more than I expected. Wood settling, maybe, or temperature changes. That's what I kept telling myself. But there were moments when the creaks didn't sound random. They sounded like steps. Slow. Around the cabin, not inside, outside. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths to stay calm. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is waking up before dawn. Not because of sound, because of silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong, like something is holding the world still. I sat up slowly. No wind, no insects. Even the cabin felt like it wasn't breathing. Then I heard it. A soft crunch outside, like someone stepping on dry leaves. One step, then another, very slow, moving around the cabin. I didn't move. I just listened. My heart started hitting harder, but I stayed still, telling myself it could be an animal. A deer, a fox, something normal. But the footsteps didn't move like animals. They were too steady, too deliberate. They circled the cabin once, then again, each circle tighter than the last. I remember leaning slightly toward the window, just enough to see outside. And that's when I saw it. The ground outside the cabin was pale in the early morning light, and on it were footprints, bare feet, human-shaped. But there was something wrong with them. They were too clean, too perfect, like they were placed, not walked. They circled the entire cabin, neat loops overlapping in places, and there was no trail leading away. No arrival, just circles, as if whatever made them had never come from anywhere. It had only been there, around me. My throat went dry. I counted them without meaning to. One full circle, then another, then a third forming halfway. And then they stopped, right under my window. I held my breath so hard it hurt. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then I heard it again. One soft step, closer than before, right outside the wall. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. And then something touched the wood. Not a knock, not forceful, just a single press, like someone checking if I was awake. That's when I noticed something else. The footprints outside had changed. They weren't just circling anymore. They were facing the door now. All of them, pointed toward the cabin, like everything that had been walking had finally decided where it was going to go next. I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes maybe, or longer. But just before the sun started rising, the pressure outside disappeared. No more steps, no more movement, only silence again. That kind of silence that feels heavier after noise. I finally forced myself to stand. My legs felt wrong, like they weren't fully awake. I opened the front door slowly. Cold morning air hit my face. The forest looked normal again. Almost peaceful. Almost. But then I looked down and saw them. Fresh footprints, leading away from the cabin, into the trees. One set, moving slowly, like someone had just left, or like something had finished what it came to do and didn't need to stay anymore. I stepped outside without thinking. Just one step, then another. The ground was soft under my feet, and I could see something else now. The footprints weren't just leaving. They were changing direction as they went deeper into the forest. Not random, not scattered, but intentional, like they were guiding me, or waiting for me to follow. And even though every instinct in my body told me to go back inside and lock the door, I found myself standing there, looking at the trees, listening to a forest that had started breathing again, and wondering one thing I couldn't explain. if no one ever arrived here? Then who had been walking around my cabin all night? The ground outside my cabin looked like it had been rewritten overnight. Not disturbed, not walked on, written. Bare footprints circled the entire cabin in a perfect loop, as if someone had measured the distance with their body and decided to repeat it again and again until morning. I stood on the porch without moving. Cold air pressed against my face, but I didn't feel it properly. My eyes were locked on the ground. One circle, then another overlapping it, like a slow spiral tightening around the cabin. And the worst part, there was no beginning, no end, no place where whoever made them had stepped in or stepped out. It was like the forest had simply allowed them to exist here. All night, around me. My throat tightened before I even realized I was breathing too fast. I told myself it had to be an animal. A deer maybe. Something confused. But the shape didn't feel wrong like an animal. It felt too human. Too careful. Each footprint was placed with the same distance, the same angle, like the walker never hesitated, never shifted weight differently, never got tired. I stepped down slowly from the porch. The wood creaked under me, and I froze instantly, as if the sound could disturb whatever had left those marks. The ground was damp. Cold soil stuck slightly to my shoes as I approached the nearest circle. And then I saw something I didn't expect. The footprints weren't just going around the cabin. They were staying at the same distance from it. Like a boundary. Like something had been drawn around me while I slept. A thought hit me that I didn't want to finish. What if it wasn't wandering? What if it was guarding? I crouched slowly, ignoring how exposed I felt in the open forest. The prints were fresh, very fresh, the edges still sharp, not softened by wind or animals. But there was no direction to them, no pattern of arrival, no exit trail into the trees, just the circle, repeating itself like a memory stuck on loop. I tried to trace it with my eyes, walking along the edge. Halfway around the cabin, something shifted in the silence. Not a sound exactly, more like pressure, as if the forest itself leaned in slightly closer. I stopped, listened. Nothing. Then I noticed something else. The circle wasn't perfect anymore. It was tightening. The spacing between footprints near the back of the cabin was smaller, like whoever walked there had slowed down, or hesitated. That detail made my stomach twist, because hesitation meant awareness. It meant something had been thinking while it walked around my cabin. I turned toward the back of the house. The windows there were dark, even though the sun was rising behind me. And for a second, I could swear I saw something inside the glass. A faint reflection that didn't match my angle. I blinked. It was gone. My heart started hitting harder. I told myself I was tired. Jet lag, isolation, anything logical. But logic doesn't explain footprints that never start or end. I followed the circle further. The ground got slightly softer on one side of the cabin, where moss grew thicker. The prints there were deeper, heavier, and that's when I noticed something that made my breath catch. There were two sets. No, not two sets exactly. One set of footprints, but sometimes doubled, as if the same step had been taken twice in the exact same place. Perfect overlap, like someone was walking inside their own footsteps. I stood up too fast. A sharp dizziness hit me, and I had to grab the cabin wall to steady myself. The wood felt colder than it should have been. Not from the weather, from something else, like it hadn't been warmed by life in a long time. I looked again at the footprints, and this time I realized something worse. They weren't just circling the cabin. They were circling closer each time. The outer ring was wider. The inner ring was tighter, like someone had walked the same path over and over again, slowly reducing the distance between themselves and the cabin. Or me. I stepped back without thinking. My heel landed on something soft. I looked down. Another footprint. Inside the cabin's immediate perimeter. Just one. Facing the door. My stomach dropped instantly, because I knew I hadn't made it. I hadn't stepped there, and nothing else should have been able to cross that boundary without leaving a trail. I looked around fast, scanning the forest. It looked normal again. Too normal. That was the problem. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt controlled, like the forest had already decided what I was allowed to see. I backed up toward the porch slowly, not taking my eyes off the circle. Then I noticed movement in the far trees. Just a shift. A shadow adjusting itself. I froze. It didn't move again. But it didn't need to, because now I knew I wasn't alone outside. I went inside and locked the door quickly. My hands were shaking more than I wanted to admit. For a few seconds, I just stood there listening. Nothing. No wind. No birds. Even the cabin seemed quieter than before, like it had absorbed the outside silence and kept it. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself water, and drank it too fast. My reflection in the window looked pale, tired, unstable. I forced myself to think logically again. Could someone have done this as a prank? No footprints leading in or out ruled that out. Could it be from last night's animals? But animals don't walk perfect circles around buildings like rituals. I stopped mid-thought. Ritual. That word didn't belong here, but it still felt right. A soft sound interrupted my thoughts. Tap. Not loud. Just once. From outside. I went still. Another tap. This time from the side of the cabin. Then silence again. My grip tightened on the counter. I didn't move. Seconds passed. Then I heard something that made my skin go cold. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow. Very slow. Near the wall outside. I stepped backward without making a sound, trying to reach the window without being seen. My reflection moved first. Then I saw it. The footprints outside hadn't disappeared. They were still there. But now they were closer. Much closer. Some were pressed right against the cabin walls, as if whatever made them had come back. And stayed. I didn't see what made them. Not yet. But I understood something in that moment I couldn't explain. The circle wasn't just around the cabin. It was a pattern. And patterns are never random. They mean repetition, observation, learning. Something outside wasn't wandering. It was studying. And somewhere deep in the forest silence, I felt a strange certainty settle into my chest. Last night wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time I noticed it. And as I stood there, listening to the soft breathing outside the wall, I couldn't stop one thought from forming. If it stayed long enough to learn the shape of my home, then how long before it learned the shape of me? I stopped counting the seconds when I realized the silence outside wasn't normal anymore. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. Every few minutes, something shifted just outside the cabin wall, not loud enough to be called a sound, more like pressure moving through wood and air, as if the forest itself was leaning closer to listen. And I kept thinking the same thing again and again. It didn't leave. The footprints didn't leave. I stood in the middle of the cabin, staring at the locked door like it could suddenly explain everything. My hands were still cold from the water I drank earlier, but now they were shaking again. Not from fear exactly, from uncertainty, because fear needs something clear. But this didn't give me that. I slowly moved toward the window. One step, then another. The floorboards creaked under me, and each sound felt too loud, like I was announcing myself. Outside looked normal at first. Too normal. Trees standing still, morning light fading into dull gray, no movement. But I already knew that didn't mean anything, because the footprints had already taught me something. The forest lies by staying still. I pressed my forehead near the glass. Cold, fogged slightly from my breath. And then I saw it. A faint imprint near the back wall. Another footprint, closer than before. Not moving, just there, as if it had decided to stay. I stepped back fast. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Think, just think. I told myself maybe it was still an animal, maybe something large, maybe a deer walking strangely. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true anymore. Because animals don't wait. They don't circle. They don't return to the same exact line, over and over again, like they are learning a shape. A soft sound broke my thoughts. Tap. It came from the side of the cabin. I froze instantly. No movement. No second sound. Just that one tap, like a finger touching wood. Then silence again. I waited, counting my heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Until I heard something worse. Not a tap this time. A slow drag. Like something brushing along the wall, testing it. I stepped back without thinking and hit the kitchen counter. A glass trembled and almost fell. I caught it just in time. That small sound felt too loud in the quiet. I didn't move after that. Even my breathing felt dangerous. The dragging stopped, then started again. This time on the opposite side of the cabin. Slow, deliberate, like it was walking around me again. But not in circles now. No, this was different. This felt closer, more aware. I turned my head slightly toward the back window, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. The footprints outside weren't just circles anymore. They were breaking formation. Some were angled toward the walls. Some stopped right at the base of the cabin, as if something had stepped out of the pattern and decided to test the boundary. I stepped back slowly. My heel hit the wooden floor too hard. The sound echoed, and instantly the dragging outside stopped. Complete silence. That silence hit harder than the sound, because now I knew it heard me. I didn't move for a long time. Minutes maybe, or less. Time felt wrong inside that cabin. Then very slowly, something new started. Breathing. Low. Not inside. Outside the wall near the kitchen. Slow inhale. Slow exhale. Like something was standing right against the wood, copying the rhythm of life inside. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. Just walls, and forest, and whatever was learning me step by step. I backed away from the kitchen slowly, trying not to make sound. But the floor betrayed me. A small creak, and the breathing outside changed. It stopped, then restarted, but now it was closer, right under the window. I turned my head slowly, and I saw it. A shadow, not fully formed, not clear, just a darker shape against the forest light. Too still to be wind, too close to be nothing. And then it moved. Not quickly, not suddenly, just a slight shift, like it had turned its attention fully toward me. I stepped away from the window so fast my back hit the wall. My heart was hitting too hard now, too loud. I was afraid even that sound would be noticed. The breathing outside stopped again. Complete silence returned. But this time it felt worse. Because silence after attention is never peace. It's decision. I don't know how long I stood there like that. But then something strange happened. The forest sound changed. Very slowly. Almost gently. The wind picked up slightly. Leaves moved. Birds far away made a faint sound. Normal life returning. And for a moment, I almost believed it was gone. I almost relaxed. That was the mistake. Because the footprints outside didn't disappear. They didn't retreat. They stayed. I forced myself to look again through the window. And my breath caught. The circle pattern was gone. Completely. Instead, there were lines now. Paths. Not random ones. Directed ones. Leading toward the cabin. Like something had stopped circling and started choosing. I stepped back from the window again. My mind tried to reject what I was seeing. But the forest doesn't care what you accept. It continues anyway. Then I noticed something else. The scratch marks on the back door. The ones I saw yesterday. They looked deeper now. Fresh. Like something had pressed against them from outside. Testing. Waiting. Trying. A soft sound came again. Not a tap. Not a drag. This time, it was almost like a step. Right at the porch. I didn't move. I couldn't. Another step. Closer. Wood creaking slightly outside. But no weight I could understand. No rhythm I recognized. Just presence. Moving slowly toward the door. I backed away from it instinctively, my eyes locked on the handle. And then I noticed something that made everything worse. The handle was slightly lower than before. Like something had touched it. Or tried it. A memory flashed in my head. The note. Do not open the door before sunrise. Sunrise was already happening. But not fully. Not enough. The light outside was still weak. Still uncertain. Another step. Right at the door now. I could feel it through the floor. Not sound. Pressure. I stepped back into the hallway. My back against the wall again. And for the first time since I arrived, I realized something simple. I wasn't alone in the cabin anymore. Even if nothing had entered. It didn't need to. It was already learning the shape of the space. Outside, the forest had gone quiet again. But this quiet was different. Controlled. Like someone had pressed pause on everything except the cabin. And I suddenly understood something I didn't want to understand. The forest wasn't asleep at night. It stayed awake. And it watched in loops until something inside responded. A small sound came from the door again. Not knocking. Just contact. Like something had rested its hand against it. Waiting. And in that moment, I realized the worst part wasn't what was outside. It was the fact that it no longer sounded lost. It sounded patient. Like it had done this before. Many times. And I stood there holding my breath, realizing I had two choices left. Stay still and be studied. Or move and confirm I was awake. And somewhere in the silence outside the cabin, I felt something settle into place. Like whatever was out there had finally learned enough. And was deciding what to do next. The footprints weren't circling anymore. That was the first thing that made my stomach drop. They had changed. Completely. I stood at the window, my breath fogging the glass, watching the ground outside like it could suddenly explain itself. But it didn't. The perfect circle was gone. Now there were lines, straight paths, leading in, toward me. I didn't move for a long time. My body refused. My mind refused more. Because circles mean confusion, repetition, something lost. But lines mean direction, purpose, decision. A cold feeling crawled up my spine as I realized what that meant. Whatever had been walking around the cabin wasn't walking around anymore. It had chosen a point. I stepped back from the window slowly, like movement itself might trigger something outside. The cabin felt smaller now. Not physically, emotionally. Like the walls had shifted closer while I wasn't looking. I kept my eyes on the front door. That was the only thing between me and whatever had changed its mind. The silence outside wasn't empty. It was focused. And then I heard it. A sound so soft I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. A step, right at the edge of the porch. I froze instantly. No wind, no animals, no shifting trees. Just that one step. Then another. Slower this time. Closer. I didn't breathe. My chest felt locked. I slowly moved sideways, keeping the door in my sight while trying to stay hidden near the wall. Another step. Then a pause. Like something was standing there now. Waiting. I could feel it in a way I couldn't explain. Not sound. Not sight. Pressure. Like the air itself had become heavier in front of the door. My mind tried to form a rational thought. Maybe a person. Maybe a local. Maybe someone checking the cabin. But even as I thought it, I knew it didn't fit. Because people don't move like this. People don't arrive without sound. And people don't feel like the world is holding its breath for them. Another sound came. Not a step this time. A soft scrape. Like something adjusting its position on the wooden porch. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry, like I hadn't drank water in days. Then silence again. Too long. Too controlled. I realized something then that made my hands start shaking. It wasn't circling anymore. It was waiting at the door, like it had finished its observation. And now it was deciding whether I was ready. A memory flashed in my mind. The note I found inside the cabinet. If you see footprints, they are already gone. But they weren't gone. They were here, right outside. I took one slow step back. The floor creaked. Instantly, everything outside stopped. Even the pressure changed. Like whatever was there had turned its attention fully toward that sound. I froze again. I shouldn't have moved. That was the mistake, because now it knew I was awake. A slow sound followed. Not a knock. Not forceful. Just contact. Something lightly touching the door. Testing it. Once, then again. The wood responded with a soft, hollow sound. And I swear I felt it through the floorboards. Like the cabin itself had recognized the contact. I backed away further, my back hitting the kitchen counter. Metal clinked softly behind me. Too loud. Too careless. I winced instantly. Outside, silence. Then a new sound. Lower. Closer. Breathing. Not loud. Not fast. Slow. Measured. Like something was standing right in front of the door, matching the rhythm of a living person inside. My stomach tightened so hard it hurt. I pressed my hand over my mouth without thinking. Even my breathing felt dangerous now. Then came something worse. A faint shift in the wood. The door handle moved slightly. Not turning, just pressure applied. Testing. My mind screamed at me to run. But there was nowhere. Only walls. Only corners. Only that door. The handle shifted again. A little more this time. Not enough to open it, but enough to show intent. I backed into the hallway slowly, my eyes locked on the front door like it could break at any second. And then I noticed something that made my breath stop completely. The footprints outside had changed again. I could see them through the side window. They weren't just lines anymore. They were stopping, right at the door. One set, not multiple loops, not patterns, just a single approach, straight from the forest. To me, I felt something twist in my chest, because now it wasn't a pattern. It was a decision, a very clear one. Another soft sound came from the door, this time like something leaning against it, not trying to break in, not forcing, just resting there, as if it had finally arrived, and didn't need to rush anymore. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time wasn't clear anymore. Then something unexpected happened. The pressure outside shifted, not away, but down, like it had crouched. I saw it in the faint light through the cracks. The shadow at the bottom of the door changed shape. Lower, smaller, more controlled, like it was adjusting itself to be closer to the ground, closer to listening. My mind started racing. Why would something lower itself like that? Then I realized it wasn't just waiting. It was studying the cabin from every angle, even the lowest one. A soft scratch came from the bottom of the door, very light, almost careful, like fingernails brushing wood. Once, then stopped, then again, but slower, like it was copying something it had learned. My breath caught. It was imitating, not random movement, not animal instinct. Imitation. A chill spread through my body, so fast I felt dizzy. Because imitation means learning, and learning means time. This wasn't something that came and went. This was something that stayed long enough to understand. Another pause, then a sound I didn't expect. A faint tap, but not from the door, from the window behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing, just glass. But my reflection didn't feel right for a second, like it had lagged behind my movement. I blinked hard. It was normal again, but my heart was already racing too fast. Now it was at both sides. Door, window, inside and outside were no longer separate. They were connected. The scratch at the door stopped completely, and in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear exactly, realization. Because silence like this doesn't come when something leaves. It comes when something listens harder. A new sound started, very faint, almost like a breath through wood. Not outside anymore, not clearly, but close enough that I couldn't tell where it came from. The cabin itself felt like it had started holding something inside it, like the boundary was no longer strong. I slowly looked toward the hallway. Dark, too dark, and I suddenly understood something I didn't want to understand. It didn't need to break in. It only needed me to react enough times to learn where I would be next. The footprints outside weren't just arriving. They were mapping. I stepped back again without thinking. My foot hit the wall, and instantly, a soft sound came from the door. A response. Immediate. Like it felt the movement. My breath stopped completely, because now there was no delay anymore. It was reacting in real time. And I stood there, pressed against the wall, realizing something I couldn't escape anymore. Whatever was outside wasn't just waiting at the door. It was already adjusting to me. And somewhere deep in the silence, I felt the worst part settle in. It didn't feel like an attack. It felt like an introduction. And I had no idea what it had planned to say next. The knock came just before sunrise. Soft, careful, almost polite. But it didn't echo. That was the first thing my mind noticed. Not the sound itself, but the lack of it. It hit the door and disappeared, like the cabin swallowed it. I was already awake, sitting on the floor near the hallway, too afraid to lie down, too tired to stand properly. When it came, my body reacted before my thoughts did. I froze, every muscle locked, and then silence returned so cleanly, it felt like the knock had never happened. I waited, counting seconds. 1, 2, 3, nothing. My mind tried to convince me it was imagination, sleep pressure, stress, anything normal. But the air in the cabin didn't feel normal. It felt aware. I slowly turned my head toward the door. Still closed. No movement. No sound. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just been there. Standing right outside. Listening to whether I responded. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. Step by step, I moved toward the door. Each floorboard creaked softer than yesterday, or maybe I was just moving more carefully now. I stopped right in front of it. No sound outside. No wind. Even the forest felt paused. Then I reached for the handle. I hesitated. For a second too long. My hand shook slightly before I touched it. Cold metal. Still, I pulled it open. The door swung slowly. Too slowly. Like even the hinges didn't want to make noise. Outside, the world looked unchanged. Morning light was pale, spreading weakly through the trees. Mist still hung low across the ground. Everything looked almost peaceful. Almost. I stepped out carefully. My eyes went immediately to the ground, and my stomach dropped. Footprints. Fresh. Closer than before. Not circling anymore. Not forming patterns. Now they were simple. A single path. Starting right at the porch. Leading into the forest. I crouched slowly. My breath caught in my throat. These prints were different. Darker. Deeper. Like whatever made them had pressed harder into the soil. But the strangest part wasn't that. It was the direction. They were not coming toward the cabin. They were leaving it. As if something had just turned around and walked away. I followed them with my eyes. They disappeared into the trees in a straight line. No hesitation. No randomness. Just intention. And for the first time since I arrived, I felt something unexpected. Confusion. Because everything before this had been about approaching. Circling. Learning. Watching. But now, it had walked away. I stood there for a long moment, staring into the forest. My mind refused to settle. Was it done? Had it left? Or was this something worse? A test? A trick? Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. The footprints didn't look like they were walking away in panic. They looked calm, controlled, like someone leaving after finishing something important. I stepped forward slowly, against my better judgment. The forest air felt different now, lighter but not safe, like a room after someone has stopped breathing inside it. I followed the trail just a few steps, and immediately saw something strange. The footprints were not continuous. They had gaps, perfectly spaced, like pauses, as if whatever made them had stopped at regular intervals to listen, or think, or wait. My throat went dry, because that meant it wasn't just walking. It was aware of timing, aware of presence. I stopped following. Something in me said not to go further, but I already had enough information, and it wasn't comforting. I turned back toward the cabin, and that's when I saw it. Another detail, right near the base of the porch. A second set of impressions, fainter, smaller, almost hidden, but still there. And they were not leaving. They were arriving, right up to the door. I froze instantly. My heart hit harder, because now I understood something I didn't want to. There were two movements, one leaving, one arriving, or something going, and something coming. My hand instinctively touched the doorframe behind me. The wood felt colder than before, almost damp, like it had absorbed too much presence overnight. I slowly backed into the cabin again and closed the door, not forcefully, just enough to feel the separation again. But the moment it shut, I heard it again. The knock, soft, exactly like before, but now inside my memory, not just sound. I spun around instantly. Door, still closed. No movement, no shadow, nothing, but I could feel it. That same pressure from before, like it was testing if I reacted the same way twice. I backed away slowly. My breathing felt too loud, too obvious. Then something changed. The silence didn't return fully this time. Instead, it stayed slightly disturbed, like something had entered the rhythm of the cabin. Not physically, but acoustically. I noticed it first in the floor. A faint creak. Not mine. No weight I could explain. From the hallway, I turned my head slowly. Dark space. Empty, but not feeling empty anymore. Something was off. Very slightly. Like the room had been rearranged without moving anything. I walked backward toward the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the hallway. And that's when I heard it. A second knock. Not on the door. On the wall. From inside. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I stopped breathing completely. The knock came again. Same softness. Same patience. But now it wasn't outside. It was inside the structure. I looked at the wall slowly. Wooden panels. Still, no visible movement. But I could feel it now. That same presence. Just behind the surface. Not breaking through. Just touching. Testing where I was paying attention. My mind started racing again. Was it following me? Or was it already inside from the beginning? A memory hit me suddenly. The scratches on the back door. The pressure at night. The breathing. It was never trying to force entry. It was trying to understand response. My reaction. My movement. My fear. Another knock. This time closer. Not louder. Closer. I backed into the kitchen counter again, gripping it for stability. My hand knocked a glass slightly. It tipped, fell, hit the floor, shattered. The sound exploded through the cabin. And instantly, everything stopped. Even the faint movement in the walls. Total silence. That kind of silence that feels like waiting for judgment. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Seconds stretched too long. Then I heard something outside again. Footsteps. Slow. Very slow. Moving away from the cabin. I rushed to the window and saw it. The footprints outside had changed direction again. But this time, they were not leaving cleanly. They were interrupted, like something had stopped mid-step, turned, and gone back into the forest. But the arriving prints near the cabin, they remained, right at the edge of the porch, fresh, unmoved, still waiting. My mind went cold, because now there was no single presence. There were layers, one that leaves, one that arrives, and something that stays. I stepped back slowly, and for the first time since I came here, I felt something deeper than fear. Understanding, not complete, but enough. This wasn't random. This wasn't even an attack. It was a system, a cycle, and I was standing inside it. Another soft sound came from the wall. One last knock, but this time it felt different. Not testing, not listening, more like acknowledgement. Like something had confirmed I was now part of its pattern. I backed away into the hallway, heart racing, trying to process what I had just learned. The footprints didn't just approach. They observed response. They adapted. And now, as I stood inside the cabin again, I realized something terrifyingly simple. The knock didn't stop because it was finished. It stopped because it had learned enough. And somewhere deep in the forest silence, I could feel the next movement already forming, waiting for the moment I would react again. The ranger station wasn't supposed to feel like this. Too quiet, too careful, like even the radios were afraid to make noise. I sat across from him, holding a warm metal cup of tea I didn't drink. My hands were still shaking slightly from the cabin. I thought I was hiding it well. I was. The ranger noticed everything. He didn't ask my name first, didn't ask why I came. He just looked at me and said one thing. "You stayed there overnight." I nodded. That was enough for him to stop smiling completely. He leaned back in his chair slowly, like my answer had added weight to the room. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. I tried to laugh it off. It's just a cabin. But even as I said it, my voice didn't sound convinced. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he opened a drawer. Inside were folders, old, worn, some even torn at the edges like they had been handled too many times. He picked one up, then paused, like he was deciding whether to show me something or not. Finally, he slid it across the table. "Read this," he said. I opened it. The first page was a report form, basic, routine. Hiker found near forest boundary, returned alone, no physical injuries, refuses to explain incident. I looked up. "That's it?" I asked. The ranger didn't answer. He just watched me read. I turned the page. Another report. Same location. Different name. Same outcome. Returned alone, silent, left the forest immediately after. I frowned. "This happens often?" I asked. He finally spoke. "More than you think." He leaned forward slightly. "And always near that cabin." That word hit differently now. Not cabin. That cabin. I closed the folder halfway. People get scared in forests all the time, I said. Maybe they just overreact. He interrupted me. No. Just one word. Sharp. Certain. He stood up and walked to a shelf behind him, took out a small box. Inside was a memory card. Old. Scratched. He placed it into a reader connected to a monitor. You want logic, he said quietly. Watch this. The screen flickered. Then a shaky video appeared. Night vision. Green tint. Forest. My stomach tightened immediately. A timestamp flashed at the bottom. 03:17 a.m. The same time I remembered from my own night. The camera showed a cabin. Not mine exactly, but identical in structure. Same isolation. Same silence. Then movement. A hiker walked into frame. Slow. Confused. He stopped near the cabin. Looked around. Then pointed the camera toward the ground. Footprints. Circling the structure. My throat tightened. The same pattern. The same circles. But then something changed in the video. The hiker stepped closer to the cabin. Just one step. And immediately stopped. He tilted his head. Like he heard something. The ranger paused the video. Listen, he said. He turned the volume up. At first, nothing. Just wind. Then, a soft sound. Not a knock. Not a branch. Something rhythmic. Like movement repeating around the cabin. The ranger resumed playback. The hiker backed away slightly. He looked confused. Then scared. Then something shifted in the video that made my skin go cold. The footprints stopped circling. And instead, they faced him. The hiker froze. His breathing became visible in the night vision. Vast, uncontrolled. He turned the camera slightly toward the trees. Nothing there. But the footprints didn't move. They stayed directed toward him. Then the audio caught something worse. A faint sound. Not words. Not exactly. More like breathing that didn't belong to one place. The hiker whispered something. Barely audible. What is that? The ranger paused the video again. This is where most people stop reporting, he said. My mouth felt dry. Stop reporting, I repeated. He nodded. Because after this point, they don't talk about it. He resumed the video. The hiker suddenly turned and ran. Fast. Back toward the trail. The camera shook violently. Branches whipped across the lens. Breathing got louder. Not just his. Something else. Following. Always slightly behind. Never in frame. Just sound. Then, the video cut to static. I blinked. That's it, I asked. The ranger didn't answer immediately. He turned off the screen. The room felt darker after it. Like the light itself had stepped back. There are more videos, he said quietly, but they all end the same way. I sat there trying to process it. My mind kept going back to the footprints at my cabin. The change in direction. The knock. The breathing. It wasn't random anymore. It was consistent. Like a system. I looked at him again. You believe all this? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window. Looked outside. Long silence. Then finally, I used to think it was superstition. That word hit hard. Used to. He turned back. I stayed there once, he said. My stomach tightened. I didn't interrupt. He continued. Not the whole night, just a few hours, wanted to prove people wrong. His voice lowered slightly, and I watched the footprints form around the cabin. My chest went cold. They were just circles at first, he said. Perfect ones, like something was packing, learning distance. He paused, then added something quieter. But they noticed I was watching. I felt my skin tighten. What do you mean? I asked. He looked at me directly now. Patterns changed. That was all he said. No explanation. Just that. Then he reached into another drawer and pulled out something small. A printed photo. He placed it in front of me. I looked at it. My breath stopped instantly. It was the cabin. My cabin. The same porch. Same angle. But the ground was covered in footprints. Not random. Not scattered. Directed. All facing inward. Toward the door. I pushed the photo slightly back. No, I whispered. He nodded slowly. You stayed there last night, he said. It wasn't a question. I swallowed hard. Then you know, he added. I didn't respond. Because I did. But I didn't want to admit it. A long silence filled the room. Then he said something that made everything worse. They don't attack immediately. I looked up. They observe first, he said. They learn reaction patterns. My hands tightened around the cup I hadn't touched. And when they understand you, he paused, they adjust. I felt my stomach drop. Adjust how? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pointed at the photo again. Do you see how every footprint faces the door? I nodded slowly. That wasn't like that at first, he said. My throat went dry. What changed it? I asked. He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, response. That word hit too hard. I suddenly remembered every sound I made, every creak of the floor, every step, every reaction, the knock, the breathing, the glass breaking. My body went cold. He noticed. That's why I told people not to stay there, he said. A long silence followed. Then he added something worse. But the ones who do always say the same thing. I looked at him. He hesitated, then said it. It starts reacting like you're part of it. My chest tightened. What does that mean? I asked. He shook his head slowly. I don't know. That was the most terrifying answer he could give. The room felt smaller again, like the walls had leaned in. He closed the folder and pushed everything away. You should leave the forest, he said quietly. But as he said it, I noticed something outside the window behind him. Just for a second, barely visible, a shape between the trees. Still, watching. I blinked. It was gone. The ranger didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. He stood up. This isn't a place you stay in, he said. I nodded slowly. But even as I did, I realized something was wrong. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if I had already left it, or if something had already left with me. The ranger didn't want me to see the second video. I could tell that before he even spoke. His hand stayed on the drawer for a second too long, like he was deciding whether ignorance was safer than truth. But then he looked at me, and something in my face must have convinced him. He pulled it out. A second memory card, older than the first, scratched deeper. This one is worse, he said quietly. That was all he said before he turned the screen back on. The room felt different this time. Heavier, like the air already knew what was coming. The video opened with darkness, pure night vision green, and then slowly the cabin appeared. My cabin, no doubt this time. Same broken railing on the porch. Same tilted stone step near the entrance. My stomach tightened instantly, because seeing it from outside like that felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Like watching yourself sleep without permission. A timestamp blinked at the corner. 03:17 a.m. The exact time the ranger mentioned earlier. I leaned forward without realizing it. The forest in the video was completely still. Too still. No wind movement. No insects. Just silence frozen in place. Then the camera shifted slightly. It was mounted on a tree. Trail camera. Old model. Low resolution. And that's when I saw it. A figure. Barefoot. Standing at the edge of the frame. My breath stopped. It wasn't fully clear. Just shape and movement. But it was human enough to make my brain reject it instantly. The figure stepped forward. Slow. Careful. Then stopped near the cabin. It didn't look around. It didn't hesitate. It just started walking. In a circle. Around the cabin. I felt my throat tighten, because I had seen those circles before, on my own ground. But seeing them from this angle was different. It felt planned, like a ritual being repeated without memory. The figure moved steadily. No rush, no pause. Each step identical, each distance measured. I noticed something immediately. The footprints weren't random. They were perfect spacing, like it had memorized the shape of the cabin's perimeter. The ranger leaned slightly back in his chair. "I told you," he said quietly, but I didn't answer. I couldn't, because my eyes were locked on the screen. The figure completed one full circle, then another, and something in my chest started tightening more with each loop. Because nothing changed. Nothing reacted. It just kept going. Like the forest was watching silently and allowing it. Then something shifted. The figure stopped mid-step, right at the back of the cabin. Completely still. My body reacted before my mind did. Something felt wrong. The camera stayed focused. The figure slowly turned its head toward the cabin wall. And for a second, I thought it was looking inside, even though that was impossible. Then it moved again. Not forward, not backward, just a slight adjustment, like it had noticed something change. The ranger paused the video. "Watch closely," he said. I didn't blink. He resumed. The figure started circling again, but now slower, more controlled, like something had interrupted its pattern, like it was recalculating. My stomach twisted, because I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just walking. It was adjusting behavior based on something unseen. I leaned closer. The footprints in the video looked deeper now, more defined, as if the ground itself was reacting differently to each pass. Then came the sound. Faint, barely there. Breathing, not from the camera, from the environment. I froze. The ranger noticed my reaction but said nothing. The figure stopped again, this time at the front of the cabin, right where the door would be. It stood there longer, too long. Then slowly, it leaned closer, not touching, just listening. My skin went cold, because I knew that position. I had stood there, the same place, The same angle. Something inside me started resisting the footage. Like my mind didn't want both realities to exist at once. The ranger suddenly spoke. "This is where it changes." He pointed at the screen. I focused harder. The figure didn't move, but the camera picked up something new. Footprints behind it. Fresh. Arriving. Not circling. Not repeating. Just appearing from the forest edge and moving toward the cabin. I felt my stomach drop, because now there were two movements. One already circling. One arriving. The arriving prince approached the cabin slowly, then stopped right near the first set. And for a moment, nothing moved. Total silence, even in the video. Then the figure turned slightly toward the arriving footprints. And that's when it happened. The ranger stopped the video again. "This part is why people stop talking," he said quietly. My throat felt tight. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just resumed playback. The figure took one step toward the arriving footprints. Then another. The arriving prints did not move. They stayed, waiting. Then the figure did something I didn't expect. It turned back toward the cabin, as if it had forgotten something more important. My mind struggled to follow. The arriving footprints suddenly shifted direction. Not away. Not toward the forest. Toward the figure. Both sets converging. Slowly. Carefully. Like two decisions meeting in the middle. Then the camera image flickered. Just slightly. A distortion. Like interference. The ranger leaned forward. "Listen now," he said. The audio sharpened, and I heard it. A knock. Soft. Exactly like the ones I heard. But this was recorded, not imagined. The figure froze. The arriving footprint stopped completely. Then something else happened. The camera picked up a shadow. Not the figure. Something larger. Behind the cabin. But it didn't move like a person. It moved like awareness shifting positions. The figure slowly turned toward it, then backed away. Very slowly. Circling resumed. But now it wasn't calm. It was controlled fear. My chest tightened, because I recognized that change. I had felt it myself. The realization that something outside the pattern had noticed you noticing it. The ranger paused again. "This is where most cameras fail," he said. I frowned. "Fail?" He nodded. "They stopped recording properly after this point." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. He just resumed again. The footage glitched harder now. Frame skipping. Sound breaking. But I still saw enough. The figure stopped circling completely. It stood still, facing the cabin. Then slowly it stepped forward, toward the door. My breathing became shallow, because I knew what was coming next. The arriving footprints followed, both sets converging directly at the entrance. And then, the camera distorted fully, but just before it cut out completely, I saw something impossible. The footprints changed direction. All of them, at once, facing outward, away from the cabin, like something inside had acknowledged being observed. The video ended. Static filled the screen. The ranger turned it off immediately. The room was silent. Too silent. I sat there trying to process what I had just seen. My mind kept replaying one detail. The way the footprints responded. Not randomly. Not naturally. But like they were aware of each other. Like they were communicating through movement. I finally spoke. "They're not just walking," I said quietly. The ranger nodded slowly. "No," he replied. He looked tired now, older somehow. "They're responding." That word again. Response. I leaned back. My thoughts felt unstable. "So what is it?" I asked. "A person, multiple people?" He shook his head. "If it was people, I would have gone in there myself." That silence after his words felt heavier than the video. Then he added something worse. "We think it's learning patterns through reaction." I frowned. "What kind of reaction?" He looked at me directly. "Any reaction." My chest tightened. "Fear," he said quietly. "Movement, silence, escape." He paused. "Even watching it." My throat went dry. I suddenly remembered every moment at the cabin. Every step I took. Every sound I made. Every time I looked outside. The ranger stood up slowly. "You should leave," he said again. But this time, it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like distance. Like he was already separating himself from whatever this was. I stood too. But before I could respond, I noticed something outside the window again. Between the trees. A shape. Still. Not moving. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if it was watching the cabin or remembering it. The ranger didn't show up that morning. That was the first strange thing. Not the missing chair, not the unlocked office door. Just his absence. Like the building had already accepted he wasn't coming back. I stood outside the station for a few seconds, staring at the quiet windows. No movement. No radio noise. Even the usual morning birds felt distant, like they were avoiding the place. Something inside me already knew before I even stepped in. I just didn't want to accept it. The door was slightly open. Not forced. Not broken. Just left the way someone leaves when they think they'll return in a minute. But he didn't. Inside, the air felt different. Thicker. Not dust. Something else. Like the room had been holding a conversation and stopped halfway through. I stepped forward slowly. My eyes scanned the desk first. Empty coffee cup. Paper scattered. A chair pushed back too far. Like someone stood up fast. Too fast. My gaze dropped to the floor. And that's when I saw it. Footprints. Inside the station. Not muddy. Not wet. Just faint pressure marks in the dust. Barely visible. Moving from desk to door. I stopped breathing for a second. Because they weren't random. They were careful. Measured. Like someone had walked slowly, trying not to disturb the room. But there was something worse. The footprints didn't enter the station. They only exited. I stepped closer to the desk. My heart already uneasy. And then I saw the logbook. Open. Page turned halfway. Ink still fresh. My hand trembled slightly as I leaned in. There was a single entry. Written in rushed handwriting. It started normally at first. Routine notes. Time checks. Forest activity. Then it stopped halfway through a sentence. And the writing changed. Slower. Uneven. Like the hand holding the pen had started shaking. I read it silently. Everything in me went cold. I thought it was repeating patterns. I paused. My throat tightened. Then the next line. But it started changing when I stopped reacting. I swallowed hard. My eyes moved faster now. The writing became worse. Letters pressing too hard into paper. Almost tearing it. Every time I watched the circles, they adjusted. A pause in the sentence. Then, I think it knows when I notice it. My grip on the edge of the table tightened, because I had heard this before. From the ranger, from the reports, from everything. But reading it here like a confession made it real in a different way. The final line was different. No hesitation, just fear breaking through ink. It learned I was watching it back. I stepped away from the desk instantly. My pulse jumped, because that sentence didn't feel like observation. It felt like surrender, like something had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I looked around the station quickly. Too quickly. Now everything felt wrong. The chair wasn't just pushed back. It was turned slightly toward the corner of the room, like someone had been sitting there, then noticed something behind them. My eyes moved toward that corner. Empty, but not feeling empty. I forced myself to breathe. Think. The ranger wasn't here. That much was clear. But where did he go? Then I noticed something on the wall. A small trail camera screen, still powered on, blinking faintly. I stepped closer slowly. The footage was paused. A night recording. Timestamp visible. 03:17 a.m. Again, that number hit me harder now. Like it wasn't time anymore. It was repetition. I pressed play. The screen flickered, and the forest appeared. Same cabin zone, same angle, but this time the camera was closer, lower, like it had been moved recently. I leaned in. The image sharpened, and my stomach dropped instantly. The ranger was in frame, standing near the cabin, holding a flashlight, his posture tense, not calm, not investigative, afraid. He wasn't walking. He was waiting, like he was listening to something the camera couldn't fully capture. Then I saw it. Footprints around him, fresh, forming slowly, not sudden, not chaotic, controlled. My breath caught. He turned slightly toward them, and I could see his face clearly now. Not curiosity, not analysis. Fear, real fear. He whispered something, but the audio was faint. Still, I caught part of it. Not again. He backed away slowly. The footprints didn't follow. They stayed in place, but they changed direction. All at once, facing him. My chest tightened. The ranger lifted his flashlight toward them. The beam shook, just slightly, not steady. Then something happened that made my skin go cold. The footprints responded, not moving, not disappearing, just shifting orientation, matching him. Every time he moved the light, they adjusted, like they were tracking reaction, not position, reaction. I felt my stomach twist, because that matched everything I had experienced. The knock, the breathing, the hesitation. It wasn't chasing. It was learning. The ranger stepped back again, then froze, completely. The flashlight dropped slightly, and I saw why. Something in the trees behind the cabin shifted. Not fully visible, just a break in shape, a distortion, like the forest had decided to stand differently. The ranger whispered again, but this time I heard it clearly. Oh no. And then, he turned and ran. The camera shook violently, branches whipping across the frame, breathing louder now. Not his alone. Something behind him, always slightly out of frame. always just beyond sight. The ranger's footsteps got faster, but the other sound stayed steady. Not rushing, matching, patient. Then the footage glitched. Frame distortion, audio breaking, and in that broken second, I saw it. The footprints were no longer on the ground. They were around him, not following paths, not patterns, surrounding him, all directions at once. The screen flickered hard, then cut. Static. I stepped back from the monitor slowly. My mind refused to stabilize what I had just seen. The ranger didn't just disappear. He got absorbed into something that understood him. A cold realization formed in my chest. The forest wasn't just observing people. It was responding to how they observe it. A system of mutual awareness. A loop. I turned off the screen quickly. Too quickly. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Then I heard something outside. A soft sound, like footsteps on dry leaves. Slow, measured. I froze instantly. My head turned toward the door, but it wasn't fully there. The sound felt distant. Not outside the building. Not inside. Between. I stepped toward the window slowly. My reflection appeared first, then the forest behind it. And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw movement. A shape standing between the trees. Still, waiting. But when I blinked, it was gone. I exhaled slowly. Too slowly. Then I noticed something on the floor near the desk. A single footprint. Inside the station. Fresh. Bare. Facing the door. I didn't move. I couldn't. Because I knew now what it meant. It wasn't entering. It was marking response. And somewhere deep in the silence of the forest, I realized something I didn't want to understand. The ranger didn't go missing by being taken. He went missing by being noticed. And as I stood there in that quiet station, staring at that single footprint, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever took him was still learning from what he left behind. The map wasn't supposed to exist. That was the first thought that hit me when I pulled it out. It was hidden inside the ranger station wall. Not filed. Not stored. Hidden. Like someone didn't want it found, but also didn't want it destroyed. My fingers were still trembling when I unfolded it on the desk. Old paper. Thin. Almost fragile enough to break just from breathing too close to it. The edges were burned. Not naturally. Deliberately. Like someone had tried to erase parts of it, but stopped halfway through. I leaned closer. My breath slowed without permission. Because the forest layout was there. But not the forest I knew. Not the one outside. This map showed something else underneath it. Something older. Something structured. And at the exact center, a mark, a circle, dark ink, surrounded by faint lines that spread outward like veins. My stomach tightened instantly, because I recognized the center point before my mind even confirmed it. The cabin. My cabin. I stepped back from the desk without realizing it. The chair creaked behind me in the empty room. Too loud. Too sudden. I forced myself to look again. The map wasn't just showing the forest. It was showing something built under it. Old paths, broken routes, and markings that didn't match any modern survey. I ran my fingers lightly over the burned edges. And that's when I noticed something written on the bottom. Faded handwriting, barely readable. Settlement removed from record. My throat went dry. Removed. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Removed. I looked closer. The name underneath had been scratched out so aggressively, the paper had torn slightly. Someone didn't just erase it. They wanted it gone completely. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. Because forests don't get removed from maps. Villages don't just disappear from records. Not without reason. Not without effort. I pulled the chair back and sat down slowly, my eyes locked on the center mark. The cabin, dead center, like everything else had been arranged around it. Not the other way around. My mind tried to push it away. Coincidence. Old mapping errors. Anything normal. But the more I looked, the more it felt intentional. Like the entire forest had once been structured around something that no longer existed on paper. I exhaled slowly, then reached for another folded sheet attached behind the map. I hadn't noticed it before. It was stuck with old adhesive, almost like a secret layer. I pulled it carefully, and my breath stopped again. It was a second map, but this one was worse, more detailed, and completely different in intent. The forest wasn't just marked, it was divided into zones, circular zones, all centered around the cabin, each ring labeled with faint symbols. Not words I understood, just marks, repetition marks, patterns. My chest tightened, because now the circles made sense. The footprints, the circling behavior, the repeated 3:17 a.m. timing. It wasn't random. It was structured. My fingers tightened on the edge of the paper, and I noticed something in the outer rings. Small notes written in rushed handwriting. Observation perimeter 1. Behavior adaptation zone. Response threshold boundary. My mind went cold. Response. That word again. The same word the ranger used. The same concept that kept appearing in logs. I leaned closer. The inner rings had darker markings, more concentrated, and the note beside them read, Core interaction zone. My heart slowed for a second. Core interaction. I whispered it under my breath without meaning to, and immediately regretted it, because the room felt like it reacted. Not physically, but in attention, like something had registered my voice. I stood up quickly, looking around the station. Empty, still, but not safe. Never safe anymore. I turned back to the map, and that's when I saw it. A final marking at the very center. Inside the cabin symbol, a small notation, barely visible. I squinted closer, and read it. Primary node. My throat tightened instantly. Node, not house, not cabin. Node, like a point in a system, a connection point, something that links everything else. My breathing slowed without permission. I stepped back again, trying to process it, but my mind kept looping. Circles, patterns, response, learning behavior, observation, and now node. This wasn't a forest anymore. Not in the way I understood it. It was a structure, a system, a network of behavior anchored around one fixed point. My cabin. I suddenly felt like I was standing inside something too large to see, and too patient to ignore. A sound interrupted my thoughts. Soft, from outside. I froze instantly, then listened. Nothing, but my body refused to relax, because silence now felt like preparation. I slowly walked to the window. The forest looked unchanged, but I knew better now. Change didn't show itself directly here. It revealed itself in patterns. I stepped back to the map again. My eyes kept going to the burned edges, and I finally noticed something I hadn't before. The burning wasn't random. It followed a shape, a deliberate cut, like someone had erased only certain sections of the forest layout, sections that connected to outer settlements. I traced the lines with my finger, and a realization formed slowly in my mind. They didn't just hide the settlement, they erased the connections to it, like cutting out a node from a network, but not destroying the system, just isolating it. My stomach tightened again, because if the cabin was the center, then everything around it was still connected, even if no one wanted it to be. I sat down again, my hands suddenly cold, and I thought about the ranger, his missing log, the trail camera footage, the footprints responding. Everything pointed to one idea. Observation wasn't passive here. It was active participation. And worse, it changed what it observed. I looked back at the map again, and something shifted in my understanding. The circles weren't paths. They were layers of attention, each ring showing a deeper level of response, like something moving closer only when it understood more. A slow compression, toward the center, toward me. My breath caught slightly, because that meant something terrifying. I wasn't just being watched. I was being approached through understanding. Another sound came from outside, this time closer. A soft scrape. I didn't move. Then another. Not random. Measured, like something adjusting position against the cabin wall. My heart started beating faster again. I slowly turned toward the door, and for a moment, I considered leaving, running, anywhere. But then I looked at the map again, and saw something I missed before. A final line drawn from the outer ring directly into the center. Straight, unbroken, no branches, no deviation, just connection. My chest tightened hard, because that line wasn't travel. It was access. I suddenly understood something I didn't want to. Everything I had experienced wasn't happening randomly. It was converging toward a point that had already been defined long before I arrived. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unstable now, and I whispered something without thinking. Then what am I? The room didn't answer, but the silence felt heavier after I asked. Outside, the scraping stopped. Complete stillness returned, and for a second, I thought it was gone again. But then I noticed something on the map. Right at the cabin symbol, a faint smudge appeared, as if something had been added recently. Not ink, not paper damage. Pressure, like a touch. I stepped closer. My breath caught, because the smudge wasn't random. It was shaped like a footprint. Small, fresh, right on the center mark. My hand slowly moved away from the paper, because now I understood something deeply unsettling. The map wasn't just showing where I was. It was showing where I had already been marked, and somewhere outside the station. I felt the forest waiting again, not circling this time, not observing from distance, but aligning, like everything had finally found its center point again. And I wasn't sure anymore if I was looking at the map, or if the map was already looking back at me. We should have turned back the moment we saw the road sign missing. But we didn't, because when you're running out of money, warnings start to feel optional, or worse, invisible. The car bounced over the rough forest road, and I kept telling myself it was just temporary. Just a cheap place to stay. Just a roof. That's all we needed. My mother kept checking her phone like it would magically show better options if she refreshed it enough times. My younger brother sat in the back, quiet for once, staring out at the trees like they were watching him back. I should have noticed that. I didn't. The cabin appeared slowly through the fog. At first, just a shape between the trees. Then walls. Then the tilted roof. Then the porch that leaned slightly to the left like it was tired of holding itself up. My father slowed the car. Didn't speak. Just stared. I remember that moment clearly. He didn't look relieved. He looked uncertain. Like something about the house didn't match what he expected. But then my mother spoke first. It's fine, it's just for a few weeks. Her voice tried to sound confident. It didn't fully land. The car stopped. No one moved for a few seconds. Even the engine felt like it didn't want to stay running near this place. Then my father got out first. The air outside felt different immediately. Thicker, still, like the forest had paused to notice us. I stepped out after him, and that's when I saw it. The ground around the cabin wasn't just dirt. It was marked, faint impressions in a circle, like someone had walked around it over and over again. My stomach tightened slightly, but I told myself it was animal trails, forest patterns, anything normal. My father didn't comment. He just walked to the door and tested the handle. Unlocked. That should have been the second warning. Inside, the cabin smelled old. Not rotten. Just unused in a way that felt unnatural. Like the air had been waiting for someone to speak again. My mother started unpacking immediately, forcing routine into the silence. Let's just clean it a bit, she said. It's fine. But I kept noticing things she didn't. The way the floorboards were slightly worn in a circular pattern near the center of the room. The way the walls felt too clean in some places and too touched in others. Like someone had stood there for long periods of time. Not sitting, not resting, waiting. My brother refused to go upstairs. He just stayed near the door, watching the windows. I asked him why. He shook his head once. That was all. By evening, the forest had gone completely quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Controlled quiet. Like sound had been told to leave. We lit a small lamp. Electricity worked surprisingly. That felt like a small mercy. My mother started cooking something simple. My father checked the locks again and again, even though there was only one door. I tried to relax. I really did. But the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. Just not visibly. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. The bed upstairs was stiff and uneven. Every small movement made the wood respond like it was remembering something. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the forest was darker than I expected. Not just night dark. Deep dark. Like it had layers. And then I saw something that made me freeze. Footprints. Outside. Barely visible in the dim light. Circling the cabin. Slowly. Evenly spaced. My breath caught. I leaned closer to the glass. But they weren't new. They looked repeated. Like the ground had been walked on many times in the same exact path. My mind tried to dismiss it again. Old forest trails. Animal movement. Anything normal. But then I noticed something worse. The prints weren't leading away. They were only circling. No beginning. No end. Just repetition. I stepped back from the window slowly, My heart started beating faster. Downstairs, I heard my mother moving slightly. Dishes shifting. Normal house sounds. But they felt wrong in this silence. Like they didn't belong here. I went downstairs. My father was sitting in a chair, staring at nothing. Not sleeping. Just still. "Did you see anything outside?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Then finally said, "Just forest." But his voice didn't match the words. My brother was awake too. Sitting on the floor now. Eyes fixed on the door. I followed his gaze. And that's when I heard it. A sound outside. Soft. Slow. Like something walking carefully around the cabin. My father stood up immediately. We all froze. The sound continued. Not approaching. Not leaving. Just circling. I felt my skin tighten. Because it matched the footprints I had seen earlier. My mother whispered, "Maybe an animal." But even she didn't believe it. The sound stopped. Complete silence returned. Too sudden. My father slowly walked to the door. Looked outside. Then opened it slightly. Just a crack. Wind moved in. Cold. Then he froze. I stepped closer. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't respond. Just stared downward. I moved beside him. And my stomach dropped. Fresh footprints. Right at the doorstep. Facing inward. But they didn't enter. They stopped just before the threshold. Like something was standing there. Waiting. My brother made a small sound behind us. Not a word. Just fear. My father closed the door quickly. Locked it. Then checked it again. Twice. 3 times. My mother started breathing faster now. "What does it mean?" she asked. No one answered. Because none of us knew. Or maybe we did. We just didn't want to say it out loud. That night no one slept. We stayed in the living room. Lights on. Listening. Waiting. And every few minutes, we heard it again. Footsteps. Circling the cabin. Always the same speed. Always the same distance. Like something was learning the shape of us inside. At some point, my brother whispered something I still remember clearly. "It knows we're here." My mother told him to stop talking like that. But her voice shook. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time stopped feeling real. Then just before dawn, everything went silent again. Too silent. Even the forest stopped breathing. My father finally said, "It's gone." He sounded relieved. But not fully. Like he didn't believe his own words. I stood up slowly. Walked to the window. The sky outside was turning gray. Morning was coming. And that's when I saw it. Footprints again. But this time, they were different. They weren't circling anymore. They were closer. Much closer. And facing the door. All of them. Aligned. Like something had finally decided where it belonged. Behind me, my brother whispered again. "They're not gone." I didn't turn around. Because I already knew. And as the light slowly touched the edge of the forest, I realized something that made my stomach go cold. The footprints weren't leaving at sunrise. They were waiting for us to open the door. It started with my little brother refusing to sleep in the dark. Not crying. Not shouting. Just a simple sentence, like he already knew no one would believe him. "There's someone walking outside," he said. My mother laughed at first. A tired, soft laugh. Like she was trying to make fear sound silly. But he didn't smile back. He just pointed at the window. I hear him every night. That was the first time I noticed his hands shaking. We thought it was imagination. Kids see things in shadows. Kids hear things in silence. That's what my father said. But that night, even he didn't sound convinced. Because the forest outside didn't feel like a forest anymore. It felt like it was listening. We tried to ignore it. We really did. We turned off the lights early, closed the curtains tighter. My mother kept saying, it's just adjustment, new place. But I noticed she checked the door lock 3 times before bed. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Like the number mattered more than the lock itself. I stayed awake longer than everyone else. I told myself I was just tired. But I was. Something about the cabin didn't let sleep come easily. Like the air itself was slightly off rhythm. Around midnight, I heard it. At first, I thought it was wind. Soft movement outside. Slow, dragging slightly across leaves. I turned in bed, listened harder, and then I realized something that made my stomach tight. It wasn't random. It was repeating. Same spacing, same pace, circling, just like before. I sat up slowly. My eyes moved toward the window without me fully deciding. The curtains were still closed, but I could feel it outside. Not see it, feel it, like presence had weight. And then I heard my brother again, from the other room. He wasn't asleep. I told you, he whispered. His voice was small, too calm for a child. My mother rushed in immediately. What are you talking about? She asked. He didn't answer her. He just pointed again, toward the wall, toward the forest side. It walks there first, he said quietly, then it comes closer. My father stepped into the room now, his voice sharper than before. There is nothing there. But even he didn't sound certain anymore. Because at that exact moment, the footsteps stopped. Complete silence. And that silence felt worse than sound. My chest tightened, because silence always meant it was closer. My brother shook his head slowly. No, he whispered, it's just waiting. My mother told him to stop. Her voice cracked slightly, but I noticed she didn't argue with the idea. She argued with the words, not the feeling. We all went back to our rooms, but no one slept. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, counting seconds that didn't feel real. And then it started again. But this time, different, slower, much slower, each step separated by long gaps, like whatever it was outside had changed how it moved. My breath caught, because I realized something simple but terrifying. It was adjusting, not just repeating, learning. I slowly got out of bed again, walked toward the window, carefully, quietly. My hand hovered over the curtain. I didn't open it yet. I just listened. And that's when I noticed something else. My brother was awake too, standing in his doorway, watching me, not scared, just waiting. I mouthed, "Do you hear it?" He nodded once, then whispered something I didn't expect. "It's slower tonight." My stomach tightened. "Slower how?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, then said, like it knows we're listening more. That sentence stayed in my head, because it didn't make sense for a child to say, unless he had been listening longer than we thought. The footsteps continued outside, slow, measured, each one heavier than before. Like distance didn't matter anymore, like it was already inside the space. My father came out again, this time holding a flashlight. "I'm checking it," he said. My mother grabbed his arm immediately. "No," she whispered sharply. But he pulled away. Not aggressively, just determined, like fear had turned into something else. Something worse. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in instantly. The sound of the forest became clearer. Too clear. And then we all heard it together. The circling. Not random anymore. Not wide. Closer to the cabin walls. My father stepped outside. We all stayed frozen inside. Watching. Listening. The flashlight beam moved slowly across the ground. Nothing visible at first. Just forest floor. Leaves. Dark soil. Then the beam stopped. My father froze. We saw his posture change instantly. Tension. Stillness. Like he had seen something he didn't want to confirm. He moved the flashlight slightly. And I saw it too. Footprints. But not like before. These were closer. Much closer. Forming a tight circle just outside the cabin walls. My breath stopped. Because they weren't random impressions anymore. They were deliberate spacing. Like something had measured the distance perfectly. My father stepped back slowly. He didn't speak. He just looked at the ground. Then at the cabin. Then back at the ground again. Like he was trying to understand which part was wrong. My mother whispered behind me, "Oh God." My brother stood completely still. Eyes locked on the footprints. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. "They're different now." My father turned quickly. "What do you mean?" he asked. My brother pointed. "They used to go around," he said. "Now they wait at the edges." I looked again. And he was right. The circle wasn't moving anymore. It was forming a boundary. Around us. My chest tightened hard. My father stepped back inside quickly and shut the door. Locked it. Then leaned against it like it might move. His breathing was heavier now. Not fear. Realization. Something deeper. Something heavier. He looked at us. "I think we need to leave," he said quietly. But even as he said it, we all heard it. A soft step. Right outside the door. No wind. No forest noise. Just one movement. Stopping at the threshold. My mother covered her mouth. My brother didn't move. And I realized something I didn't want to accept. It wasn't circling us anymore. It had stopped. Right where we were supposed to decide. Inside or outside. Then came the second sound. A single step again. Closer this time. Not fast. Not aggressive. Patient. Waiting for reaction. My father raised his hand slowly toward the door lock. Then stopped. He looked at us. Like asking permission without words. My brother whispered again. "If we don't move, it learns slower." That sentence hit something in my mind. Slower meant safer. But not safe. Just delayed. My father didn't open the door. He stepped back instead. Smart decision. Or maybe instinct. The footsteps outside stopped again. Complete silence returned. But now silence felt intentional. Like it was waiting for us to act first. My mother sat down slowly, whispering prayers under her breath. My brother stayed standing, still watching the door. And I noticed something in his expression now. Not fear anymore. Recognition. Like he had started understanding the pattern faster than us. Hours passed like that. No one slept. No one spoke loudly. Then just before dawn, my brother pointed again. To the window. "Look," he whispered. We all turned. And outside, the footprints had changed again. But this time, they weren't circling. They were forming something new. A shape. Not random. Not natural. A line. Pointing directly toward the door. Straight. Final. Like something had finished learning how we respond, and was now ready to choose the next step. The first thing my father did that morning was buy locks. Not one. Not two. A full box of them. Like the problem could be solved with enough metal and screws. He didn't say much while unloading them from the car. Just kept repeating the same line under his breath. "We secure it, we secure it, we secure it." My mother didn't argue anymore. Even she had stopped pretending this was normal. My brother sat on the porch steps watching him. Silent, too still for a child. I stayed near the window, because I already knew something my father didn't want to accept. Locks don't matter when the thing outside isn't trying to enter. It's trying to surround you. By noon, the sound of drilling filled the cabin. Sharp, repetitive, almost comforting at first, like structure returning to chaos. My father started with the front door. New lock, then a second one above it, then a chain, then another chain, each one louder than the last, each one more desperate. My mother moved around behind him, covering windows with old wooden boards we found in the shed. Every hammer strike echoed through the walls like the cabin was reacting. But the forest outside stayed silent. Too silent. No birds. No wind. Just that same waiting feeling. I remember thinking that silence was never a good sign anymore. By afternoon, the cabin looked different. Heavier. Shut in. Like we were building a box around ourselves instead of a home. My father stepped back finally, wiping sweat from his forehead. "There," he said, "now nothing gets in." He sounded almost proud, almost relieved. But then my brother spoke quietly from the stairs. "It's already in." My father turned sharply. "Don't start that again," he said. But my brother didn't look at him. He was staring at the floor, at the dust near the hallway entrance. I followed his gaze, and my stomach tightened instantly. There were prints, bare, fresh, inside the cabin boundary. Not moving, not circling yet, just present. My breath caught. I stepped closer slowly, because I knew those patterns now. Circular spacing, measured steps, the same kind we saw outside. But now they were inside the house perimeter. Not in the center, not near us, just around us. My mother noticed too. She froze mid-step. "What is that?" she whispered. My father walked over fast, looked down. Silence, then denial immediately. "Impossible," he said, but his voice didn't match his words. He knelt down and touched the floor lightly, then pulled his hand back like he had touched something wrong. The prints weren't dirty. They weren't muddy. They looked like pressure, like something had stepped through the wood instead of on it. My chest tightened, because I realized something I didn't want to understand. These weren't entering footprints. They were boundary prints, marking space, defining shape. My father stood up quickly. "No more windows open," he said. "We stay inside. We keep everything locked." He sounded like he was trying to convince the house more than us. My mother nodded silently. My brother didn't move. That night, we didn't turn on many lights. Just one lamp in the center of the room. Everything else stayed in shadow. The cabin felt smaller now. Not physically, emotionally, like the walls had moved closer. I sat near the window boards listening, waiting, and then it started again. Soft movement, inside the perimeter, not outside, inside. My breath slowed instantly, because the sound didn't come from distance anymore. It came from around us, circling the cabin walls again. But now we were inside that circle. My father heard it too. He stood up immediately. "That's not possible," he said again. But no one believed him anymore. The sound continued. Slow, measured, like something walking along the inside edge of a drawn shape. My brother whispered, "It learned the new line." My mother turned to him sharply. "What line?" He didn't answer. He just pointed downward, at the floor, at the space we were standing on. My skin went cold, because I understood what he meant. The footprint pattern outside wasn't gone. It had been recreated around us. Inside, my father grabbed a flashlight. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He walked to the hallway first. We followed him reluctantly. Each step felt wrong, like walking inside something that was aware of being walked in. The flashlight beam hit the floor, and I saw it again. The prints, new ones, fresh, forming a circle around the living room. Not complete yet, but forming, slowly, patiently. My mother gasped quietly behind me. My father froze. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he whispered, "How is this happening inside?" No one answered, because we all knew the answer would break something we couldn't fix. The sound inside stopped again. Complete silence returned. But now silence felt like completion, not absence. My brother stepped forward slightly. "They're learning the shape of us," he said quietly. My father turned to him. "What does that even mean?" My brother looked up this time, and his face looked older than it should have. "It doesn't need doors," he said. "It just needs space." My stomach tightened hard. My father shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "No, that's not how anything works." But even he wasn't convincing himself anymore. We went back to the main room, sat together, lights on, waiting again. Waiting had become our life now. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't behave properly inside the cabin anymore. Then something changed. The lamp flickered once, just once, and every one of us noticed. My mother grabbed my arm slightly. My father looked up immediately. The flame steadied again, but the silence outside changed. It felt closer, heavier, like pressure dropping before a storm. Then my brother spoke again. "They changed direction," he said. My father looked at him sharply. "What direction?" My brother pointed toward the hallway. Toward us. We all turned slowly. The hallway looked normal. Too normal. But I could feel it now. The weight of attention. Like something had stopped circling randomly and started choosing. My father stood up again. This time slower. Careful. He walked toward the hallway. We followed. Not because we wanted to, because we couldn't stay behind. The flashlight turned on again, beam shaking slightly now. My father stepped forward, and I saw it first this time. The prints weren't forming circles anymore. They were forming lines, straight paths, all converging. toward the center room, toward where we were standing. My breath caught, because this wasn't observation anymore. This was direction. My mother whispered, "We need to leave." My father didn't respond. He just looked at the floor, then said quietly, "We already tried locking it out." His voice cracked slightly at the end. My brother stepped closer to me and whispered something I'll never forget. "It's not outside the house anymore," he said. I looked at him. He continued, "It's inside the pattern." My stomach dropped instantly because I realized something terrifying. We weren't inside a cabin anymore. We were inside a shape that something else had already finished drawing. The flashlight flickered again, this time longer, and in that half second of darkness, we heard it. One step, inside the hallway. Not outside, inside. And this time, it didn't stop. I found her journal by accident. It was open on the kitchen table, like she had been writing and suddenly stopped caring about hiding it. The page was still wet in places. Ink smudged like her hand had shaken while writing. I didn't want to read it, but I already knew something was wrong the moment I saw her face that morning. She wasn't looking at any of us. Not really. Her eyes kept dropping to the floor, like she was listening to something below us, something we couldn't hear yet. The first line in her entry made my chest tighten. I can hear it under the floor now. No explanation. No build-up. Just that. My fingers went cold holding the page, because we had already heard it in the walls. But under the floor was different. That meant it wasn't circling anymore. It was settling, like it had found where we stood. I kept reading. My mother wrote that she first noticed it at night. Not footsteps, not knocking, breathing, slow, controlled, coming from beneath the wooden boards. At first she thought it was pipes, old cabin sounds, normal excuses your mind makes when it refuses to accept fear. But then she wrote something that made me stop breathing too. It stops when I stop moving. I looked up from the journal instantly. The cabin felt different now. Quieter, too aware. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just her imagination under stress. But then I remembered last night, when we all froze in the hallway, and everything went silent the moment we stopped moving. I swallowed hard and kept reading. She wrote that she tested it. On purpose. She walked across the kitchen slowly, and the breathing under the floor matched her steps. Perfectly, like a shadow learning rhythm. Then she stopped, and the breathing stopped. Then she stepped again, and it followed again. My stomach twisted hard, because that wasn't coincidence. That was imitation. My mother had written one line under it. "We are not alone. We are being mirrored." I heard something shift behind me. I turned fast. Nothing, just the empty hallway. But my skin was already crawling, because I started noticing it too. Every small sound I made had a delayed echo. Not in the room, below it, like something underneath was copying the timing of everything. My hands tightened around the journal. The next page was worse. She wrote that she started noticing patterns in us. Not just sound, movement. When my brother scratched his arm in his sleep, she heard it under the floor a second later. When my father opened a door, she heard the exact same motion below us. Even when she whispered to herself, something beneath whispered back. Not words, just tone. Same rhythm, same breath. My chest tightened, because I remembered something my brother said earlier. It doesn't need to copy us, it learns us. I didn't understand it then. Now I did. My mother had written something at the bottom of that page, and her handwriting changed there. Smaller, tighter, like fear was shrinking her hand. It is practicing us. My throat went dry instantly. Practicing, not copying, not repeating. Practicing, like we were becoming something it needed to understand before it could become us fully. I turned the page slowly. My fingers were shaking now. The next entry wasn't dated, just a single paragraph. Rushed, broken. I saw it under the floorboards. My heart stopped for a second. She wrote that she was sitting at the kitchen table at night. Everyone asleep. Only one light on. She heard breathing again. But this time it wasn't random. It moved in sync with her thoughts. When she became aware of it, it paused. When she distracted herself, it returned. Then she did something she shouldn't have. She stood up and looked down between the cracks of the wooden floor, and she saw movement. Not a face, not a body, just a shadow shifting in perfect rhythm with her own stance. When she leaned forward, it leaned forward. When she pulled back, it pulled back, like a reflection that refused to stay under glass. But worse, because it was under the house, under her feet, watching through wood. She wrote one sentence after that, and it was barely readable. It doesn't look like me yet, but it is learning the shape of me. My breathing felt too loud, too exposed. I looked down at the floor instinctively. Nothing visible, just wood, old wood. But now I couldn't unsee it. The idea of something below, waiting for my next movement. Studying it, I turned another page quickly. Her handwriting was worse now. Jagged, almost angry, like she was writing faster than she could think. I tried to confuse it. That was the line. She wrote that she moved randomly, stopped patterning herself, stopped walking normally. She tried to break rhythm, to make herself unreadable, but it still followed, perfectly, even when she pretended not to move, even when she froze completely. It still breathed under the floor at the exact same moment she thought about breathing. I felt a chill run through my chest, because that meant it wasn't reacting to movement anymore. It was reacting to intention, to thought. My mother wrote one more thing on that page, and it made my stomach drop completely. It is inside the idea of us. I had to stop reading for a moment. I couldn't breathe properly. The cabin felt smaller again, like it was leaning in, listening to the journal with me. I forced myself to continue. The final entry was the worst. The ink was smeared across the page, like she wrote it in panic, or while running, or while something was right behind her. I think it knows I'm writing about it. My blood went cold. She wrote that the breathing changed after she started journaling. It became more focused, less random, more aware, like it was reacting to documentation itself. Not just movement, not just sound, but observation. She wrote that when she wrote the word it. The breathing stopped for a full minute, then returned closer than before. She wrote that she heard something shift directly under her chair, directly under her. And then, a pause in the writing, a long blank space, then one final line, written with pressure so strong it tore the paper slightly. It is copying me writing this. My hand dropped the journal instantly, like it burned me. My heartbeat hit my ears because I realized something that made everything worse. If it copied movement and sound and thought, then writing was just another form of movement, a structured pattern, a predictable one. I looked around the kitchen slowly. Everything felt too still, too synchronized. Even the air felt paused, like something beneath us was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the next mistake. Then I heard it, a faint scratch under the floor, slow, deliberate, like a pen touching wood. I froze completely. The sound stopped instantly. My throat tightened. I didn't move. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then my hand twitched slightly, almost involuntary. And underneath the floor, something twitched back, perfectly matched, identical timing. My breath broke because I wasn't alone in the room anymore. I was being reflected from below. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which version of me was real. He arrived just after noon. No warning, no group, just a single car rolling up the dirt road like he already knew the cabin better than we did. I remember thinking that was the first mistake. People who arrive alone in places like this usually don't stay alone for long. He stepped out slowly, like nothing here could surprise him. Clean jacket, clean notebook, calm eyes. Too calm, like he had already decided what this place was before seeing it. My father met him first at the steps. "Dr. Hale," the man said, shaking his hand firmly. "Anthropology, field research." My father looked confused. Anthropology of what? The man smiled like that was the most normal question in the world. "Human behavior under environmental stress," he said, "and pattern formation in isolated settings." I stood behind the window boards, watching him. Something about him felt wrong in a different way. Not fear, not danger, confidence, the kind that ignores warnings because it assumes warnings are emotional, not real. He looked at the cabin like it was a puzzle already halfway solved. Not a haunted place, a case study. That was his mistake. He came inside without hesitation. That was the second mistake. We didn't even try to stop him anymore. We were past convincing, past explaining. We just watched. He set his bag down in the living room like he owned time itself. Then he pulled out recording devices. Small ones, clean ones, professional ones. "My equipment will monitor sound frequency shifts," he said casually. "Also movement tracking, possibly thermal variance." My mother didn't respond. She just looked at the floor, at the wood, at what was already listening. Dr. Hale noticed her stare. "Is there structural damage?" he asked. My father laughed once. "Short, empty. You could say that." The man knelt down immediately, tapped the floor. Once, twice, like he was knocking on reality itself. I felt my stomach tighten, because I knew what would happen next. The cabin listened back, but it didn't yet. Not while he was testing it. That was important. It waits until you believe it is safe to observe. Then it changes the rules. He placed a small recorder on the floor. Green light blinking. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very low ambient vibration, almost unnatural stillness." My brother whispered behind me. "It's watching him back." I told him to be quiet, but I didn't really believe it anymore. Not like before. Dr. Hale walked slowly through the hallway. His steps measured, controlled. He was mapping us. Not the cabin. Us. I've heard reports, he said without turning. Local psychological contagion phenomena, shared hallucination clusters, suggestive environmental triggers. My father rubbed his face. That's not what this is. Dr. Hale smiled slightly. That's what everyone says. Then he stopped walking. Right in the center hallway. Right where the prints usually formed first. He crouched, looked down, and I saw it immediately. Nothing. No prints. No marks. Nothing visible at all. My chest tightened, because that was new. The thing was hiding itself. Or waiting. Dr. Hale looked satisfied. Exactly as expected, he said. My mother finally spoke. What do you expect? He didn't look at her. Human pattern projection under sensory deprivation. He tapped his recorder. It explains the circular footprints, the repeated reports, the synchronized behavioral feedback loop. My father stepped forward. No, he said firmly. You don't understand. It's not feedback, it's... Dr. Hale raised a hand gently. I understand fear, he said. Then he smiled again. And I understand how it organizes itself. That sentence made something cold settle in my stomach. Organizes. Like it was structure. Like it was math. Not something alive. That was how he was already losing. Because he refused to see it as awareness. We went through the night, waiting for him to notice. He set up cameras in every corner. He placed sensors near the floorboards. He even drew diagrams on paper, mapping angles, distances, symmetry lines, like the cabin was just geometry that had gone wrong. And for a while, nothing happened. No sound, no movement, no breathing under the floor. Nothing. It was worse than before, because silence felt like observation now, not absence. Dr. Hale grew confident. I think we're dealing with residual cognitive imprinting, he said at one point. Possibly collective suggestion from prior occupants. My father laughed bitterly. You're talking like it's a story. The man nodded. Most fear phenomena are. That was the moment I realized something important. He didn't think we were lying. He thought we were misinterpreting. There's a difference. A dangerous one. Around midnight, he reviewed the recordings. We all gathered behind him. Even my brother. The screen showed empty rooms. Empty hallway. Empty floor. Nothing. Dr. Hale leaned back. As expected, he said softly. No independent anomaly detected. My mother whispered, then why does it feel like it's still here? He didn't answer immediately. That question made him pause. Just for a second. Then he said, because you've been trained to expect it. He clicked his pen. Expectation sustains perception. I remember that line. Because it sounded so clean. So safe. And that was exactly what made it wrong. Then the camera feed flickered. Just once. A small distortion. Dr. Hale leaned forward immediately. Ah, he said, signal interference. But I saw it differently. In that one frame glitch. Something was behind him. Not clearly. Not fully formed. But present. Like a shadow deciding whether to exist. The feed stabilized again. Empty room. Dr. Hale smiled slightly. Nothing, he said. But I couldn't stop staring at the screen. Because I was sure I had seen movement. Not inside the camera. Inside the timing between frames. That night, he stayed awake longer than any of us. He wanted proof. He said it openly. I don't leave until I isolate a repeatable pattern. My father told him that was a bad idea. He ignored it. My mother didn't argue. She just held her journal tighter than usual. Around 3 a.m., the house changed. Not sound, not movement, structure, subtle at first. The floorboards felt aligned differently, like the cabin was tightening itself. Dr. Hale noticed too. He looked down at his instruments. All sensors stable, he said. No external disturbance. But his voice had changed slightly. Less confident, more careful. Then my brother spoke quietly. It's not external anymore. Dr. Hale turned toward him. What did you say? My brother didn't answer. He was staring at the floor. I followed his gaze, and I felt my stomach drop. The sensors on the floor had shifted slightly. Not physically, logically. Their readings were matching movement that wasn't happening in the room. Dr. Hale frowned. That's impossible, he said. But his voice wasn't certain anymore. The first sound came at 3:17 a.m. Not a knock, not a step, a synchronization. All sensors responded at once, at the same time, even though nothing moved. Dr. Hale stood up immediately. What triggered that? He said sharply. No one answered. Because we knew. It didn't get triggered. It aligned. Then all cameras flickered at once, just like before, but longer. And in that flicker, the cabin was not empty anymore. Not visually, not conceptually. Something stood where Dr. Hale had been looking. Perfectly still, perfectly watching. The cameras returned to normal. Empty room again. Dr. Hale exhaled sharply. I saw something, he said. My father stepped forward slightly. Finally, but Dr. Hale didn't respond to him. He was staring at the screen now. Not the image, the pattern beneath it. And for the first time, his confidence broke slightly. That shouldn't be possible, he whispered. And I realized something then. He wasn't scared of ghosts. He was scared of something that behaved like data. Something that changed the rules of observation itself. Something that reacted when you looked too long. The cabin creaked softly beneath us. Not randomly, like breathing. And for the first time since he arrived, Dr. Hale didn't write anything down. I stopped thinking of them as footprints the moment I saw the pattern repeat. Not once, not twice, but perfectly, like the forest floor itself was learning to write something. Dr. Hale was the first to notice it. Of course he was. He had filled every surface with notes by then. Graphs, angles, timing charts. He looked at the floor like it was a problem waiting to be solved, not a warning waiting to be understood. It's not random, he said quietly. We all turned to him at the same time. He was kneeling near the hallway again, flashlight angled low. The beam cut across the wooden floor. And there it was. The footprints, but not scattered anymore. Not circling, not drifting. They were arranged. Even spacing. Equal distances. Like someone had drawn invisible lines and forced movement to obey them. My stomach tightened instantly, because I had seen them before. But not like this. Dr. Hale moved the flashlight slowly across the floor. The spacing is consistent, he said. Too consistent. My father stepped closer. What does that mean? Dr. Hale didn't answer immediately. He was calculating. That was the worst part. Not fear. Not confusion. Calculation. It means, he finally said, That whatever is producing these is following rules. My brother whispered from behind me. Or making them. Dr. Hale heard him. He didn't dismiss it this time. He just looked down harder. The footprints formed a repeating structure. Not just circles anymore. Now they were overlapping arcs. Intersections. Patterns inside patterns. Like something trying different design to see which one worked best. I felt my skin tighten. Because that wasn't behavior. That was experimentation. Dr. Hale pulled out a notebook immediately. Started sketching. Vast. Precise. Like the fear in the room wasn't real enough to interrupt his logic. Look at this, he said, flipping the notebook toward us. Lines. Circles. Rotational symmetry. Even reflections. It's not chaotic, he said. It's iterative. My mother stepped back slightly. I don't understand. He nodded quickly. It's refining itself. That sentence hit something cold in my chest. Refining. Like steel. Like language. Like identity. My father shook his head. This is insane, he muttered. You're saying the footprints are learning. Dr. Hale didn't correct him. That was the answer. And that silence said everything. We moved outside after that. Not because we wanted to. Because Dr. Hale insisted. He wanted a full perimeter scan. He said the structure of the pattern might extend beyond the cabin. My mother refused at first, but he was already halfway out the door. So we followed. The air outside felt different now. Heavier, not quiet like before. Organized quiet, like something had arranged the forest into stillness. Dr. Hale walked ahead with a handheld scanner. It beeped softly every few seconds. I'm mapping spatial variance, he said. If the pattern continues outward, we should see. He stopped, mid-sentence. That alone made my stomach drop. Because Dr. Hale didn't stop mid-thought. He followed thoughts to completion like it was his job. But now he was staring at the ground. We followed his gaze, and I felt something twist inside me. The footprints were outside too, but not random, not scattered through the forest. They formed paths, straight lines through trees, curves that aligned with the land. And worse, they matched what we saw inside. The same symmetry, the same spacing, as if the entire forest was becoming part of the same drawing. Dr. Hale crouched immediately. His hand trembled slightly now. Just slightly. But I noticed. That's impossible, he whispered. My father let out a short laugh. Yeah, he said, you keep saying that. Dr. Hale ignored him. He was tracing the prints now, with his fingers hovering just above them. Not touching. Careful. Like even contact might change the result. These aren't just repeating, he said. They're optimizing. My brother stepped forward. What does that mean? Dr. Hale hesitated. That was new. Then he said it. It means each cycle improves the structure. A cold silence followed that. Even the forest felt like it paused to understand. My mother whispered, cycle. Dr. Hale nodded slowly. Yes, look at the variation. He pointed at one section of prints. Then another. Then another. Each set slightly more refined. Smoother arcs. Cleaner angles. Less wasted movement. My chest tightened harder with every word. Because I started seeing it too. At first, I thought it was just repetition. But now I saw progression. Like evolution happening in real time. Not biological. Geometric. My father rubbed his forehead. This is ridiculous, he he said again, but his voice was weaker now. You're turning dirt into math. Dr. Hale didn't smile this time. He looked serious. No, he said quietly. I think it's turning behavior into structure. That sentence made the forest feel closer, like the trees leaned in slightly. Listening, we followed the trail deeper for the first time since arriving. Dr. Hale led, always forward, always confident again. But now it felt different. Less arrogance, more compulsion, like he had stopped choosing to investigate and started needing to. The deeper we went, the clearer the pattern became. The prints weren't just on ground anymore. They influenced movement paths between trees. Branches bent in repeated directions. Leaves flattened in symmetrical arcs. Even the soil looked patterned in places. My brother stopped walking suddenly. I don't like this, he said quietly. Dr. Hale turned. For emotional reasons. My brother shook his head. No, he said, because it's getting closer. We all stopped. The forest was still. Too still. Dr. Hale looked around slowly, then checked his scanner. It beeped faster now. Magnetic variance increasing, he murmured. Spatial distortion minor but measurable. My mother grabbed my arm. Hard. What does that mean? She asked again. Dr. Hale didn't answer immediately, because he was staring at something behind us. We turned, and I felt my breath stop. The footprints didn't just lead forward anymore. They circled behind us, closing the path, not trapping physically, structurally, like we had walked into a diagram that had already decided its boundaries. My father stepped back slowly. This is not possible, he said again, but now it sounded like a question. Dr. Hale finally spoke. It's not reacting to us, he said. He swallowed once. It's arranging us. That was when I realized something I didn't want to understand. We weren't following the pattern anymore. We were inside it, and we were part of its next iteration. My brother whispered something I barely heard. It's trying a new version. Dr. Hale turned sharply. What did you say? My brother pointed at the ground, and I saw it. Fresh prints forming. Not ours. Not old ones. New. Right where we stood. Perfect spacing. Adjusting in real time. My body went cold, because it meant one thing. The pattern didn't stop when we stopped. It continued through us. My mother whispered, "We need to leave." But no one moved, because the path behind us had already shifted. The exit was no longer where we came from. It had changed shape. Dr. Hale stared at the ground for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. If this is a language, he said quietly, we've been speaking it by walking through it. A pause. Then worse. And now it's answering back. The scanner beeped one last time, then stopped completely. Dead silence followed. And in that silence, the forest took one step closer. It started with the cameras dying one by one. Not all at once. That would have been too clean, too simple. Instead, they failed like something was learning how to break them properly. Dr. Hale noticed first. Of course he did. He was watching the live feed when the first screen froze, then unfroze, then showed something different for half a second, then returned to normal. He leaned forward slowly. Did anyone else see that? He asked. No one answered fast enough, because we weren't sure anymore if we had seen it, or if it had just shown us something meant only for that moment. The second camera went dark 10 minutes later. Then the third. Each failure came with the same pattern. A brief distortion, a delay, a correction, like something was testing how much it could change before we noticed. My stomach tightened as I watched Dr. Hale switch between feeds. Signal degradation, he muttered, possibly environmental interference. But his voice didn't match his words anymore. He didn't believe that. Not fully. Then the fourth camera came back online. And everything changed. The screen showed the hallway. Empty at first. Static humming softly in the background. Dr. Hale adjusted the contrast. Leaning closer. I need clean data, he said quietly. Then the image flickered. Just once. And in that flicker, something moved. Not fast. Not hidden. Aware. Dr. Hale froze. He rewound the feed immediately. We all gathered behind him now. Even my father. Even my mother. The screen played again. Hallway. Empty. Static. Then flicker. Movement. But this time slower. Clearer. Like the camera was trying to cooperate. My breath caught. Because I realized something terrifying. The camera wasn't failing. It was negotiating. Dr. Hale whispered, "That's not artifacting." He stopped himself mid-sentence. His hand hovered over the controls. Then he rewound again, frame by frame. And there it was. A shape, not fully formed, but positioned exactly where movement should not exist. It wasn't standing. It was adjusting, like it had noticed the camera noticing it. My brother stepped back slightly. "It's learning how to be seen," he said quietly. Dr. Hale didn't respond. He was too focused now, too far in. "That's impossible," he said again, but weaker this time, less confident, more defensive. Then the next feed failed, but not to black, to something worse. It didn't go off. It changed. The camera showed the same hallway, but from a slightly different angle. An angle we didn't install. My father noticed it first. "That camera isn't placed there," he said. Dr. Hale checked the system instantly. "No," he whispered, "it is. The feed should not have existed. But it did. And it was looking at us. Not the hallway. Us." A cold silence filled the room. Even the lights felt less stable, like they were waiting for permission to continue. Then the image shifted again, slightly closer, not zoomed, moved, as if the camera itself had taken a step forward. My mother grabbed my arm. Hard. "What is it doing?" she whispered. Dr. Hale didn't answer immediately, because he was realizing something at the same time we were. The system wasn't just recording anymore. It was participating. The fifth camera came back online, but only for a moment. It showed the living room. We were all there, but wrong. Not physically, positionally. We were arranged slightly differently than reality. My father stood closer to the window. My brother facing the hallway instead of the table. My mother angled toward the floor more than I remembered. And me. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking behind it. I felt my stomach drop, because that moment wasn't real. But it had been recorded, or created, or predicted. Dr. Hale shut the feed off immediately. "Stop looking at it," he said suddenly. His voice sharper now. Not calm anymore. Not analytical. Stop interacting with it visually. My father turned to him. "What does that mean?" Dr. Hale hesitated. That hesitation said everything. It's adapting through observation, he finally said. Every time we view it, it adjusts. My brother whispered, like it's getting used to being watched. Dr. Hale nodded once. Slowly. Yes. Then worse. Or learning how to use watching. The word hung in the air. Use. Not respond. Not react. Use. Something in the room shifted after that. Not physically. Structurally. Like the idea itself changed how the cabin felt. The cameras all rebooted at once. Every screen lit up. Every feed active. Every angle alive. Dr. Hale didn't touch the controls this time. He just stared. Because now, all feeds showed the same thing. The cabin. From inside. From outside. From above. Angles that should not exist. And in every single one. We were there. But not consistently. Sometimes standing. Sometimes still. Sometimes mid-movement. Like time had been stretched and reassembled incorrectly. My breath became shallow. Because I understood something my mind didn't want to accept. We were no longer being recorded in real time. We were being sampled. Dr. Hale whispered, "This is impossible." But he didn't sound sure anymore. The cameras flickered again. And this time, they showed something new. Not distortion. Not lag. Coordination. All feeds aligned perfectly. Every screen showing the same frame. The hallway. Empty. Still. Silent. Then a single movement. Slow. Deliberate. Something stepping into frame. But it wasn't entering. It was resolving. Like it had been there the entire time. And was just now being allowed to exist in the image. My mother stepped back. "No," she whispered. The figure didn't have clear edges. It wasn't a person in the normal sense. It was a consistency. A pattern holding itself together long enough to be perceived. Dr. Hale leaned forward slightly. His voice cracked just a little. "That's not data," he said. Then corrected himself. "That's not supposed to be data." The figure turned its head slightly. Not toward the hallway. Toward the camera. All cameras. At once. Every feed reacted. Static spikes. Image compression. Frame delay. Like the system itself was flinching. My father took a step back. "What is it looking at?" he asked. No one answered. Because we knew. It wasn't looking at anything physical. It was looking at the act of being recorded. The cameras began to change faster now. No longer breaking. Evolving. Each feed showing slight variations of the same moment. The hallway. The figure. Us in different positions. Every variation closer to accuracy. Closer to correction. Dr. Hale slammed one of the monitors off. It immediately turned back on. He unplugged it. It still displayed the feed. That was the moment his confidence finally broke. "This isn't system behavior," he said quietly. Then louder. "This isn't system behavior." My brother stepped closer to me. "It's inside it now," he whispered. Dr. Hale turned sharply. "What did you say?" My brother didn't repeat it. He just pointed at the screen. And I saw it too. Inside the feed. Inside the hallway image. There were new angles forming. Not from cameras. From perspectives. Like something inside the system was generating viewpoints that didn't belong to any device. My mother whispered, "It's inside the data." That was when everything went silent. All monitors froze. Every camera feed locked. not off. Paused, like the system was holding its breath. Then one feed resumed. Only one. The oldest camera. The hallway. The figure was closer now. Much closer. And this time, it wasn't pretending to be subtle. It was fully aware it was being seen. Dr. Hale whispered, "It adapted." His voice broke slightly. It adapted to observation. The figure moved one step forward, and every camera mirrored it. Not delayed, not glitching, synchronized, as if the system itself had accepted that movement was shared. My father backed away from the monitors. "This isn't possible," he said again. But no one listened anymore, because now the cameras weren't just showing the cabin. They were showing us inside it, from angles we had never been in, from positions we had never taken. And in one feed, I saw myself, standing still, looking directly into a camera that was not in the room, smiling slightly, even though I wasn't smiling at all. That was when I understood the final truth forming under everything. It wasn't just watching us anymore. It was building versions of us that matched the watching. Dr. Hale whispered one last thing, barely audible. It learned how to exist in being seen. The lights flickered once, and every screen went black. For a moment, only a moment, then all feeds returned. And this time, the cameras were not recording us. They were waiting for us to move first. I didn't notice the first audio glitch until the third replay. The recorder was sitting on the table, still warm from my hand. I had just finished another log about the cabin, about the footprints, about the things that don't make sense. I pressed stop. I thought it was done. But then I heard it. My own voice coming from the speaker. It's learning faster than I can record it. I froze, because I never said that line. Not out loud. I leaned closer, thinking maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I had spoken it under my breath. The recorder crackled again. My voice repeated clearer this time, almost calm. It's learning faster than I can record it. And then something strange happened. A second voice slipped in under mine. Not mine. Same tone, same packing, but wrong in a way my mind couldn't hold at first. It repeated the sentence like it was tasting it, like it was practicing. I turned the volume down so fast my hand slipped. The room went silent again. But silence didn't help, because now I knew something was inside the recordings. Something that wasn't just replaying. Something that was continuing. I picked up the recorder and checked the files. There were 12 audio logs. I only remembered making 9. My stomach tightened. I opened the last file. The timestamp said it was recorded 2 minutes ago. But I had been sitting still that whole time. No movement. No speech. Still, I pressed play. At first there was breathing. Soft, close. Too close for a device sitting on a table. Then my voice came in. But it wasn't telling a story anymore. It was responding. You hear it now, don't you? I felt my skin go cold, because I hadn't asked the question. The recording continued. A pause. Then the second voice returned. Not mocking this time. Curious. We hear it now, don't we? My throat tightened. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was agreeing with me. Or worse, it was including itself. I stepped back from the table like it had moved. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had shifted inward while I wasn't looking. The recorder kept playing on its own, even though I wasn't touching it, even though I had stopped the file. Another sound came through. A faint scratch, like something adjusting a microphone from the inside. Then my voice again, but slower. Careful. Don't write that down. I flinched, because I had never spoken that sentence either. The second voice followed immediately, almost overlapping. Don't write that down. A perfect echo. Too perfect. And then a third layer came in. A whisper that didn't belong to either of us. Too late. I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor, but the audio didn't stop. It kept speaking from the ground. I backed away, my heart hammering so loud I could barely hear anything else. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied, but something in the air changed. Like attention had shifted toward me. Not from a direction, from everywhere. I forced myself to pick up the recorder again. My fingers were shaking. I opened the files. One new recording had appeared, named Log 13. I never created a 13th log. I didn't want to press play, but I did, because not knowing felt worse. The audio started with silence, then a sound I didn't recognize at first. Paper, turning, like someone reading my notes. Then my voice came in again, but it was not speaking to me this time. It was speaking about me. He thinks it started outside. A pause, then the second voice. Calm, patient, but it started when he started recording it. My breath caught. I stepped toward the window without thinking. Outside, the forest was still. Too still. No wind. No movement. Just darkness sitting in layers. The recording continued behind me. Every time he records us, we learn the shape of him. I turned slowly. The recorder was on the table again. I was sure I dropped it. Sure I saw it on the floor. But now it was back, perfectly placed, like it had never moved. The voices continued, now overlapping faster, practicing, merging. His fear pattern is consistent. His pauses are predictable. His silence is data. I felt sick, because it wasn't random anymore. It was studying me the same way I studied it. I tried to stop it. I hit buttons, swiped files, pulled the battery. Nothing worked. The device didn't shut off. It didn't even glitch. It adapted. Then my voice came through again. But this time, it sounded closer than the speaker. Too close. You're listening too slowly. I spun around. No one there. Of course, no one there. But I could feel it. Not watching from outside. Listening from inside the pattern of sound itself. The second voice spoke again, softer now. Almost gentle. We are learning how you end your thoughts. My head went numb. Because I realized something I didn't want to admit. Every time I hesitated in my recordings. Every time I paused to think. It filled in the gap. Not with noise. With intention. I stepped back until I hit the wall. The recorder continued. Now faster. More confident. Like it had stopped asking and started deciding. He will try to stop recording. He will isolate himself. He will think silence is safety. Then a pause. Longer than before. And the final line came through. Not in my voice. Not in any human voice I could place. Just shaped like speech. Perfectly formed from everything I had ever recorded. We will wait inside the next file. The recording stopped. Total silence followed. But it didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like storage. Like something had been saved. And was waiting to be opened again. I looked at the recorder one last time. The screen flickered. A new file appeared. Not named, just a blinking cursor, waiting for a title. And without touching it, I heard my own voice whisper, softly from nowhere at all. Press record. I stopped trying to run the moment. I realized the cabin wasn't keeping me in. It was waiting for me to stop moving. The silence outside had changed again. Not gone, not broken, just focused. Like the forest had finally finished listening to everything I had ever said. The recorder sat on the table, screen still glowing. That empty file was still open. The blinking cursor didn't feel like a prompt anymore. It felt like a question I was supposed to answer with my life. I backed away slowly. Every step I took made the floor creak louder than it should have. Not because the wood was old, because something was paying attention to each sound. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, isolation, too many nights without sleep. But then I heard it. A soft shift outside the cabin wall. Not a branch, not wind. Something heavier adjusting its position. Like it had been standing still for a long time and finally decided to get comfortable. My throat went dry. I looked at the window. The glass was dark but not empty. There was a reflection there. Not mine. Not fully. Just the shape of someone standing behind me in the room. I turned fast. Nothing. Of course nothing. But the reflection stayed for half a second longer than it should have before fading. That's when I understood something I didn't want to understand. It wasn't appearing in the room. It was appearing in perception, in delay, in interpretation. I stepped toward the door anyway, because fear starts to feel like pressure after a while, like something building up behind your ribs until you either move or break. My hand touched the door handle. Cold metal. Too cold. I paused, and then I heard it again. Footsteps outside. Slow. Measured. Not circling anymore. Approaching. Each step placed carefully, like it already knew where the weak parts of the ground were. I didn't open the door. I should have not opened it. But I did. The forest hit me like a wall of air. Cold, heavy, still too quiet. And the footprints were there. Fresh. Closer than before. Not circling. Not wandering. Now forming a straight path toward the cabin door. Ending exactly where I was standing. I stepped back without thinking. The moment I moved, the next set of prints appeared. One step forward, matching mine. Perfectly. I froze. The forest didn't move, but the pattern did. It adjusted, like it had corrected an error. Behind me, inside the cabin, the recorder beeped softly. A new file had started on its own. I didn't turn around yet, because I could already hear my voice inside it, speaking before I spoke. It's close enough now. My stomach twisted. I turned back into the room slowly. The recorder was recording again, but this time the audio wasn't delayed. It was live, as if the cabin itself had become a microphone. My voice came through clearly. Calm. Too calm. You opened the threshold. I whispered no, but the recording didn't wait for me. It continued. You defined the boundary. The second voice joined immediately after. Gentle, almost patient. You gave it structure. My head spun. I looked at the walls, at the window, at the corners of the cabin, where shadows felt slightly thicker than they should have been. Everything felt arranged now, like the space had been categorized, mapped, understood. The footsteps outside stopped. That was worse, because stopping meant arrival. I moved toward the window again. Slow, careful. My reflection appeared first, then something behind it. Not standing, not fully formed, just suggested, like a thought the glass couldn't finish translating. I stepped back. The reflection stayed longer than I did. Then it smiled. Not my smile, but shaped from my face, from watching me long enough to predict it. I whispered, "What are you?" The recorder answered before the forest did. My voice again. Soft, certain. You already named it. I felt my knees weaken, because I remembered now. All the notes, all the logs, all the recordings. Every time I described it as something. Every time I tried to define it. Every time I gave it structure through language. I wasn't documenting it. I was shaping it. The second voice spoke again. Closer now. Not through the recorder. Through the room itself. Observation requires interpretation. The cabin lights flickered once, then stabilized. But the light felt different, like it was being filtered through something else, something paying attention to how it illuminated objects. I stepped toward the door again, this time slower, because I needed to confirm something. I opened it. The footprints were still there, but now they weren't just in the dirt. They were slightly deeper, like something heavier had stepped into them. Then something impossible happened. A footprint appeared inside the cabin, right at the threshold, facing inward. I stepped back immediately. Another print formed, closer to me, not entering fast, not rushing, just continuing the pattern, respecting the rhythm I had established. I understood then. It wasn't breaking in. It was following procedure. My breathing turned shallow. The recorder beeped again. New file. New name. This one already labeled. Entry CONDITIONS met. My voice played, but it wasn't mine anymore. It was structured like mine, built from everything I had ever said. The subject acknowledges the pattern. I shook my head hard. No, I don't. The second voice responded instantly. Denial recorded. Another footprint appeared inside. Closer. Now clearly inside the living space. Not outside anymore. The boundary had already been accepted. I stepped backward until I hit the table. The recorder vibrated slightly. Another file opened. This time it wasn't audio. It was a playback of silence. Then my voice, very faint. It enters where it is understood. My chest tightened, because I finally understood what the ranger log meant, what the anthropologist missed, what the cameras never captured correctly. It wasn't invisible. It was unclassified. And classification had been happening through me the entire time. Every log, every recording, every attempt to explain. I had been building it a place to exist. Footstep by footstep, word by word. The cabin creaked again. Not from wind, from weight distribution changing inside it. I looked down. Another footprint, right next to my chair. Dry, fresh, perfect. I didn't hear it enter, because it didn't enter. It arrived already structured, already accepted. The recorder spoke one last time. Not my voice, not the second voice. Something unified. Now we can continue without you interpreting. The air went still, not silent, still, like the entire space was waiting for instruction. I backed toward the wall. My hand brushed the door handle again. Cold. Still cold. But now I wasn't sure cold meant outside anymore. I whispered, barely audible, "If I stop recording, what happens?" The recorder answered immediately. My voice. Soft. Certain. Then we will record you instead. The last thing I saw before the light dimmed was the footprint beside me shifting slightly. Not moving, just adjusting direction, aligning with my position, like it had finally learned where I belonged in the pattern.